You can also add spring cover crops. I don't know what that means.
Anything we plant in spring as opposed to after wheat or in the fall. So
Oh,
there'd be
okay.
stuff we might put in April to
Okay.
terminate in time for soybeans,
All right.
like rye or other things.
Oh.
Three farmers have no trouble filling an hour.
Dean, have you gotten into your wheat yet?
We did. We started on Friday in Harrow and finished on Saturday.
Wait, you guys can't give it all away.
Oh,
These are part of my
sorry.
questions.
Oh,
It's
sorry.
like,
Sorry. It's
yeah, come
fascinating.
on.
What did I tell you? Farmers put farmers together and they talk.
I'm like, wait, man.
Meanwhile, Greg's wheat's just heading out.
Yeah, do we have a number for Greg? He was on there, right?
He responded yesterday. He probably just needs Sophie to remind him. You don't have if he doesn't come on in a second, I'll give him a text.
He's here.
Okay.
He's just coming in.
Oh, yay. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started now that all of our panel members are here. Want to thank you for coming out to another one of our Grain Farmer and Friends coffee chat hours. So hopefully you have your coffee or mid-drink of choice, and we'll have a chance to ask some questions and learn about what's happening with our grain farmers. And today our topic is about cover crops, what works and what doesn't. And just to note that our panelists are panelists that we've actually had out now for several times. So we've been building a rapport, learning about what's been going on through the season, and so the series is really meant to create practical conversations for organic grain farmers, transitioning farmers, or anyone that's actually interested in working on the ground or just learning more. And so cover crops are one of those topics in theory that sound really simple, but the reality is much more specific. And I think we're going to hear a lot about that today. And the work depends on the rotation, the soil, the equipment, where we often hear about all the different equipment variations between our panelists here, timing, weed pressure, and I imagine how much water we have had and not had will also affect some of those things as well. And so we want to talk about the cover crops that work. And we're also one of the things I want to mention about cover crops is they're a really important part of organic crop management. So they play a major role in not just being there, but their soil health, nitrogen management, that weed suppression piece, erosion control, and just overall building resilience into a soil system. And so today when we talk with the panelists, we're going to talk about all the pieces and why they're chosen, what part they play, and when they don't want them there anymore, how they get rid of them. So those will all be part of some of the questions we'll talk about today. And so just before we start, a couple of notes. If you have any questions, you're going to drop them into the chat, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end. Sometimes the panelists answer the questions in the chat, which is fine, but we can also leave some time to ask them. And if I see them as well, I might ask them as part of our questions. And then and if you have any really specific questions that are out there, feel free to also drop them in. We do have the three experts with us, and it's a great opportunity for us to ask those questions. So before we dive in, I want to make sure that we acknowledge the land that we're on. So we're all across Ontario, potentially across Canada, and so the land acknowledgement is fairly broad in that we are coming from across Ontario, and that we recognize that the farms, the lands, the food systems that we work within and that we are in are part of the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations. And what's so amazing is with farming and organics, we it can acknowledge the long-standing relationship they've had with the land and the knowledge they've brought to us and their knowledge that continues to shape how that land is cared for today. I'd like you to take this time and just to let us know where you're coming from in and if you're part of the organic value chain, which everyone actually is here because the organic value chain is from the farmers who have their fingers in the dirt all the way to the people that are choosing organic food at the grocery store. So let me know where you fall in that organic value chain in the chat, and it gives us an idea of where you're coming from. And if you want to also add in your land acknowledgement, where you're at, you can also add that there. Um, a little bit about Ontario Organic is if you don't know, we're a small but mighty group, and so we work really hard to serve the organic value chain all across Ontario and even across Canada. We help out in many ways as well, and so we are comprised of our staff as well as our board members. And I want to mention that we are coming up in September. We will have our general meeting and our annual general meeting, and we will be looking for board members. So we do have a couple of board positions to fulfill, and I think this is a great opportunity to mention that those will be coming up. We have some certain positions specifically that are available, and Dean, who's on here as one of our panelists, has been a board member for a few years now, I think. And we're very happy to have him on as our one of our certified producers. And Dean, you're not in this picture though. Yeah, I think you were the only one missing that day. Oh no, you are. You're in the far left. I see you. Um,
I should never be on the far left.
Um, and then, yeah, so we're just here to provide education, resources, tools, answer questions, and help to establish public trust in organics, as well as working on policy and advocacy for our healthy food systems. So we have a really important role, and we are not for profit. So everything that we do is, because we've received funding from our membership and the organic, all of those players in the organic industry. So let me introduce you to our panelists today. So we have our first panelist is Greg Dineen, and he's located near Kenilworth, and Kenilworth is near. If people don't know where Kenilworth is, Greg, where is Kenilworth?
That's about an hour north of Guelph.
An hour north of Guelph, and so he is in a very unique place compared to our other two panelists, which is really great to we have this wide assortment. And I will actually let you go ahead, Greg, if you want to talk a little bit about just like a minute about your farm and what you're doing there, so that our um, audience here has a understanding of your particular situation on your farm.
Okay, yeah, we're about an hour north of Guelph, so we're a bit short on heat units, but we're on a pretty nice silt loam soil. We're running 430 plantable acres, and we do corn, soybeans, wheat, winter wheat, winter rye, and black beans.
All right.
We also have a poultry barn, so we have some chicken manure available to us, and we also get some hog manure from a nearby barn. So I'm pretty lucky as far as nutrients go. But yeah, our main restraint is just yeah, kind of late frost and early frost, and wish we had some more heat units some years, but that's all right. Other things going for us.
All right, thanks so much, Greg. And our next panelist is Dean Martin. And so he and his two sons operate Harrow Organic Farms, and they actually have two locations. Dean, do you want to share a little bit about your farm?
Yeah, Harrow Organic Farms in Essex County down near Windsor. And we operate in Harrow about half the operation. The other half is on Pelee Island out in the middle of the lake. So we're doing about 1,300 acres, something like that. Just one son farming with me now. The other one's now a John Deere salesman. And yeah, we're growing soybeans, wheat, sometimes corn, sometimes barley. And yeah, just, doing what we can.
All right. Okay, thanks so much, Dean. And finally, Phil Ugama is Ugama Grains, I think is the name of your farm. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yep, you said it right, Erica. It's Phil Ugama. Good job. So we're in the St. Thomas, London area, kind of in between St. Thomas and London, just south of the 401. We farm here corn, soybeans, wheat, sometimes spelt, sometimes black beans or kidney beans, dark red kidneys, light reds, cranberry beans. So it just depends on the year and how much courage I have, whether or not to grow the those large seeded edible beans. Yeah, we also have a little commercial grain elevator here, so we do a little bit of buying and selling of grain as kind of a side hustle here at our farm as well.
Okay, all right. Thanks so much. All right, so my first question for you today, which you guys already tried to ask each other before we even got started, but is I want to find out about your wheat crop and how long until harvest, or maybe you've already harvested. Phil, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so like most, I don't know where everyone on this call is from, but here in southwestern Ontario, it's been hot, and for us, it's been dry. So our wheat has just come a really long way in a very short amount of time. So if I didn't have my organic inspection this afternoon, I would be starting the wheat right after this call. But it'll have to wait until either this evening or tomorrow. So we're pretty much ready to go for our wheat here. So it's nice, a good time to get started, middle of July.
All right. And I'm actually going to use this opportunity because you've mentioned you've got your organic inspection today. How long is that going to take and how much prep did you have to do for it?
Well, I've had it, they say it should take 4 hours. I've been here for 7, not because I didn't have things organized, but because I just kept asking lots of questions. I anticipate the inspection will take 4 or 5 hours or so. And this year I've been as organized as I've ever been. So as I've been going along, I've been keeping all my records ready to go and organized. So it only took me a day of prep work to make sure I had everything all set up and ready to go. So, knock on wood, I'm feeling all right. Should go smoothly.
All right, knocking on wood for you here. All right, Dean, how about you? How's the wheat? And I guess it's going to be your two different locations. Is it, ready to harvest, or have you already harvested?
So we started on Friday in the Harrow area, and it was a little high in moisture, but we wanted to get it off so we can get to the island. So we took it off at 15, 16%, put it in the grain bin with the dryer. We finished up on Saturday, and I have a schedule for the Tuesday boat, Tuesday night, to go to the island. So Tuesday night, we'll be on the ferry with combine, grain truck, and the header cart. And then we'll start on probably Wednesday over on the island. We have, I don't know, 160 acres to do over there.
All right. And you mentioned some percentages there. Do you want to explain what that is, that 15, 16%?
Moisture of the grain. So the wheat, you want it around 13.5% moisture. And when it's not quite ready or in the morning dew, it's a little higher in moisture. I have the advantage of having a grain dryer, and I don't mind taking it off a little higher in moisture and putting it through the dryer. Costs a few cents a bushel, but you get a better quality grain if you do it early. And yeah, it's just something we do. We don't have that on the island, so we'll be trying to take it off at more optimum moisture of 13 to 14%, and then bringing it to the mainland here to, if it is high, bring it to the mainland and put it through the dryer.
Okay. And how do you measure the moisture content of the wheat?
There's a little electronic device. Just put a small sample of 250 grams in it, and it just spits out the moisture. So we've got a handheld one that we carry in the combine. The combine actually has a running one, and then I have a office one that's a little more accurate that we use. And everything's about if you deliver and you're a little bit too high, they'll dock you, or if it's really high, they can reject you. So you really want an optimum of about 13.5% moisture, and then that grain will keep for a year when it's at that moisture. If it's too high in moisture, if you were taking it off at 17, it would only keep a couple days in a wagon without any air going through it.
Okay, so it's really important.
It
All
is.
right. Yeah. And Greg, how about you?
At least 2 weeks until wheat up here. Um, maybe a little bit longer. It'll probably look like it's ready in 2 weeks, but it'll still be slow and tough to combine. So probably the yeah first week of August. It's kind of rare that we get going before August 1st. I think there's only been once in the last 7 or 8 years. So we're yeah, a little bit further behind. But yeah, that's all right.
Yeah. And are all of you on schedule, behind, or ahead of schedule, the other ones? So you're behind, Greg. Was that because of that early
Well,
moisture, or
no. I would say that we're on schedule. I
you're
would say
on schedule?
this is on schedule for my area.
Yeah. How about you?
We're a little bit ahead. I would say a lot of Southern Ontario was ahead of schedule by 2 or 3 days at least.
Mm.
Yeah,
Same for you, Phil?
that checks out over here. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so you're going to take down the wheat. And I'm actually kind of curious about, like, what that actually looks like when you're taking the weed off. And then you're going to put something on the ground afterwards, which we call cover crops. Dean, do you want to tell me a little bit about what that process looks like, and how you get from one step to that next?
So the combine will cut off the grain. We don't harvest the straw; it's spread back on the field. Some guys who want to keep the straw for livestock bedding will windrow it and bale it, but we just spread it back on. Cover crop for wheat can take a couple different forms. One is a clover, which you would spread in March and April in the wheat, and then it just kind of grows as a mat down in the bottom. And then as you harvest the wheat, it just naturally takes over. Um, that goes for, well, there's a couple of different types of clover. We've not done that. Sometimes the clover will actually, in organic, start to outgrow the wheat a little bit, especially if you're using double cut red clover. We've gone to we're going to harvest the wheat, and then we'll disc it, and then we will put in some oats and peas. And we're actually growing oats and peas on the next field, and we'll be harvesting that, and then probably immediately putting it down for to grow. We've done that the last couple years. It's just the other advantage of that is it kind of dies out. Oats and peas will kill out in December when it gets really cold. You'll get growth until then, and then you don't have to deal with terminating it in the spring with a disc or with tillage because the winter will have already done it. There's advantages to having green in the spring, and there's advantages to not having green in the spring. So that's kind of how we do cover crops with the wheat.
Okay, how about you, Phil?
So there's a couple different scenarios for us. Our most typical scenarios is like Dean was describing. We'll put seed red clover into the winter wheat in early spring sometime, and we've been doing it as we spread our fertilizer on the wheat in the spring. And so the same machine that spreads the fertilizer also will spread red clover on the field. So I guess to step back a little bit in terms of like why grow cover crops in the first place. The One of the main drivers for us is well, there's two drivers. One is nitrogen management and production, and the other is ground cover for erosion control. So red clover, it's a great cover crop. It will fixate nitrogen out of the air and put it into the ground. And so that nitrogen will be available for the subsequent corn crop the following year. So it really works very, very well. It also, gives good cover after your wheat is off. And what we'll do when the wheat comes off, the clover will start to grow, but the weeds will as well. And so we'll mow our wheat fields once, sometimes twice, just to get the weeds knocked down, to give the clover enough time and space to grow up. And once the clover is really established, the weeds can't it outcompetes the weeds. So basically, for us, the nitrogen side of red clover is very important. So in other scenarios, if we have access to, say, poultry manure, we'll spread the poultry manure on the wheat field. And usually we'll either disc it or plow it. And then after the poultry manure, we're still thinking about nitrogen. With poultry manure, there is a fair bit of soluble nitrogen, so we want to capture that before it dissolves into the water and goes through the field tiles and down the drains and into Lake Erie here. So in that scenario, we'll plant a three-way cover crop mix of oats, radish, and usually crimson clover. Sometimes it's five with a bunch of other things, but planting oats after manure, the idea there is that the oats will scavenge some of that more soluble nitrogen and put it into the oat plant and hold it there. There is a bit of a balancing act with oats, where, if oats get too, I guess if they grow for too long in the fall and they get too stemmy, you'll tie up nitrogen into the following year, and you won't have that access to that nitrogen in your corn crop. So there's a bit of a timing thing with the oats. You don't want them to get too big in the fall. But generally, we choose cover crops that will kill in the wintertime, like a frost will take the plant out. But for us, like I said, it's primarily nitrogen production and nitrogen management when we choose our cover crops.
Okay. Yeah, that's really informative around all the choices and why you're making those choices, and even interesting to think that you're choosing something because you know it'll definitely be killed in the winter and you don't really have to deal with it later too. So,
Could I ask Phil a question?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Phil, what type of clover? You use single cut or double cut red?
Yeah, so we use single cut, and that's exactly for what Dean mentioned. Single cut, it doesn't grow as lush and large above the surface, but I think it's equal in terms of subsurface, of subterranean root structure. And so the single cut, it doesn't look like it's doing as much because there's not as much biomass on top, but there's a lot going on below the soil. And like Dean said, if you have a wet stretch right around harvest and you have double cut clover, then the clover will be as tall as the wheat. So when you're running the harvester through your wheat and you're trying to combine, you've got a lot of green material that's going through the machine. And typically combines, they're great, but they don't like green material. It turns into a paste and it coats your auger beds and your screens. It can be quite miserable if you've got too much green stuff. And it kind of adds a stink a little bit to the wheat sometimes as well, which is not great when you send it to like a food mill, for instance. So single cut seems to hold off long enough that we can get the wheat mowed off, or the wheat harvested. And so we've learned that through the school of hard knocks, I would say.
All
Correct.
right.
That's the point I was wondering about, because single cut will give you an extra couple weeks before it gets to that same height, and it just makes harvest. There's been times I did harvest with double cut red that I thought I was on a forage harvester. There was so much green
Yeah.
going through. The other thing I'll mention, Phil, is just that clover is very good at tying up free nitrogen. People don't think that, but it is actually good at grabbing that. What it does, though, is it does it at the expense of making nitrogen. So it will keep the nitrogen from going down the tile, but it does so without nodulating it. So it does tie it up, but you don't get any extra at the end of the day.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's interesting, Dean. It's like a typical legume with soybeans, right? If you add nitrogen to soybeans, it just says, "Oh, good, it's right here. I don't need to work for it," so it stops producing its own. So
Yep.
in many ways, with soybeans, adding nitrogen is kind of a fool's errand because you're trading off nitrogen production the plant would do by itself through nodulation for paying for it. So that's a great point, Dean.
The great the great thing about clover and wheat is when you harvest the wheat, you've got this lots and lots of carbon, and it's all sitting there. And then you're growing the clover, which is lots and lots of nitrogen. And so you're creating a perfect balance of nitrogen and carbon, just like you would in a compost pile. And the two kind of fix one another, and it's a perfect combination. Without that much carbon, clover can actually use up carbon in the ground when it releases the nitrogen. It'll burn up a lot of your carbon. There's more carbon in clover than what is needed for to make organic material. So the wheat and clover actually do is a great combination.
Do you guys want to explain what the nodulation, the nodules for some people who might not understand that term?
Nodulation is when a legume is fixing nitrogen from the air, and you pull out the roots, and you'll see the roots have these little look like little round balls, and it's nodules that are full of nitrogen that it's fixed from the air. You can actually tell on soybeans, especially, but other things too. You pull it out, and how well it's actually fixing nitrogen this year based on how the conditions are. And so if it nodulates really well, you can get 100 pounds of free nitrogen from the clover. You don't always know when that's going to be released. It may not. It may be released in the wintertime when it's washed away, but there is a potential for 100 pounds there.
That's really impressive. Yeah. Greg, how about you? What's your process looking like there? I know you're a little bit later, so maybe you have different choices for those
So
um,
I
cover
was just
crops.
thinking how I've had that same experience where like I relive my childhood on a dairy farm where like, oh, it's like the smell of fresh silage. Too bad I'm supposed to be harvesting wheat. Yeah. Makes the best of the combine, takes way more fuel. Grain smells just a little bit funky. Um, yeah. We mostly don't have trouble with that. I would say the clover mostly catches well and it grows well, but if you have a decent stand of wheat, it's doesn't get quite too high, but it is still a risk. Um, yeah, we've more had trouble with terminating clover. Sometimes the right window gets away from you in the fall and you have to do it in the spring. And we especially had one year where it was just wet almost until June and then it becomes gigantic. So sometimes you almost have to have a neighbor take a cut off of it and then decide if you want to try to spring plow it. But if you're already running late, you might not have the conditions for doing that. And then yeah, I don't know. We've sort of moved to after the wheat, we'll work everything up well and we'll either do work on like we'll stone pick the field, we'll correct drainage mistakes, we'll do tree trimming, like we'll at the moment we're just kind of fallowing after wheat. And then we go straight back into rye in early September. So there'll be 4 to 6 weeks that the field is just fallow, and then back into the rye. And then our main cover cropping opportunity is when it comes out of the rye, then what will we do? Because it'll be corn the next spring. And so that'll either be another spring cereal. It's like we'll kind of get it all worked up and get the residue gone. And then end of August, we'll do a spring cereal, often oats or spring wheat. Or we'll just put a bunch of manure down. We'll put hog manure down, and then we'll cultivate it as if we're preparing a seed bed, and then we'll just leave it alone. And if you get a little bit of rain after that, you can get a flush of mustard so intense it looks like I'm growing like a canola field. And in the right conditions, it's really beautiful. The canola will suffocate out thistles really effectively. And so if you get like a wet, cool fall, but you don't get a frost till the end of October, you can get an incredible stand of mustard that I think is the best cover crop. The only thing is if it gets away from you and sets seed, then you do have to go out and mow it or knock it down or do something with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my cover crop is just growing weeds.
Is mustard like a really good nitrogen fixer as well?
I think it would be a decent scavenger of nitrogen, but it's not doing any fixing for you. And so we are putting the manure out partly to trigger those more nitrogen sensitive weeds to grow because sometimes you'll get more germination because the conditions are better. And then we're hoping that manure is going to be tied up by those weeds. We're hoping they're going to get frosted off and just kind of remain as as dry matter on top of the field, and then often the worms get them in the spring. So the field will look overgrown, and then it will be all kind of, matted, frosted off material, and then the worms will take it out kind of early March, and you can go into a relatively clean field to break ground again.
Okay.
So,
And so, oh, go ahead, Dean.
Greg, you're using a spring canola, or is it mustard? Canola is in the mustard family.
Yeah, yeah, um yeah, mustard just looks a lot like canola when it grows big. But no, I'm not putting anything down. I'm just saying I'm growing the natural weeds that I have. A
Gotcha.
lot of mustard. And so it's being that it's so small seeded, if you leave the field pretty coarse, you won't get as much of it. You have to go out and almost set the cultivator for making a seed bed, maybe even have a roller behind it. And so you make that kind of make like an alfalfa seed bed, like what an alfalfa or a clover would like, where it's kind of smooth and consolidated on the surface. And then if you get a little bit of rain on top of that, yeah, it's incredible what the mustard will do.
I had a fellow tell me this spring that he had bought mustard seed to plant as a cover crop. And I'm like, no,
That's insane.
it's insane because all of Ontario fights mustard as a weed, and
Mhm.
mustard seed lasts in the soil for 50 years. So
Yep.
they're dormant, can lay dormant for 50 years. And in Essex County, we're probably one of the first ones to terminate mustard. And so we don't have any natural mustard that comes up here, touch wood. And I am scared to death of anything in that family for fear that there's one seed in there that's a mustard seed that's going to repopulate what once was the terrible weed of my grandfather. So,
Yep.
but anyway, that's I was curious.
I think it's an interesting discussion, and I think it goes back to like if you're going to start growing cover crops, um, like you got I'm getting preachy here. You got to figure out what you're going to do and why you're going to do it. And particularly when it comes to seeds, like do your research about things like mustard and even like vetch, for instance. Like these things can sound great. Like mustard's been known to be a biofumigant, and vetch is a great nitrogen fixator. But with some of these seeds, if you plant them, you're going to have that seed in your system for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. So like I would be very cautious and understand the properties of the seeds that you're going to be planting so that you don't have a problem that you didn't anticipate, in the next 5 or 10 years. So even what's it's shoot, there's a cover crop that grows really, really quick and it's got these beautiful flowers. And it's escaping me right now.
Buckwheat.
Um, what's
Harry,
that?
Harry Vetch,
Buckwheat.
No, not hairy vetch.
wheat,
Shoot. Yeah, buckwheat. Buckwheat.
yeah.
That's another example of a really nice cover crop. It's got a great place in your system, but chances are if that goes to seed, or even if it doesn't go to seed, you're gonna be having buckwheat show up in your soybeans and in your corn for the next couple of years. So I would say if you're gonna get into cover cropping, just make sure you know um, what you're doing and what blend you're using, why you're doing it, and what the potential ramifications are of using, whatever seeds you're going to be using.
The old saying is, once you grow buckwheat, you always grow buckwheat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And uh, and it's a very good point you make about knowing what your goal is, because the prevailing thought is you want cover crop, you want lots of varieties, and just need cover green. And there's very little thought that's given to what your goal is. Is it nitrogen? Is it carbon? Is it erosion? Because
Mhm.
depending on your goal, that determines what you do. And having six varieties looks good on paper, but you end up with just what happens to survive in those conditions that spring. And if your goal is increasing the carbon, that's very different than growing nitrogen for next year or
Mhm.
for weed suppression or other things. So you really have to identify your goals and then stop trying to do everything and just really narrow down what it is you want as your goal.
I think another thing to consider when you're looking at cover crops is, and Greg, you mentioned it, is termination. How are you gonna terminate that cover crop? How are you gonna kill it? I've mentioned this, I think, a couple times in previous sessions that we've had. What we tried to do for quite a long time with our red clover was we let it go through the fall, through the winter, and into the spring. So it would frost off, it would die, and then in the spring it would wake back up, and you'd have this beautiful green mat of clover. Um, and so it had a ton of, I think, great advantages because I think it held the nitrogen better. It provided a really good erosion control over the wintertime. But the problem for us was that we could not effectively terminate that without doing an obscene amount of tillage in the spring. And then we had residue problems with on the surface of the ground, and so we had a very difficult time getting a good even corn stand, with the kind of weed control that we did. So our cultivator would bung up with, would get plugged with residue, clover residue. Residue would fall into the row when we were doing our blind pass. You can't really use a harrow, a tine weeder. And so, we're all just managing a big series of trade-offs, and we kind of made the decision that the trade-off, the good soil health trade-off in this particular case wasn't enough to overcome the yield drag and the stand problems that we had in the corn. So we made the decision this last year that we plowed our clover late in the fall. This year, I think we'll do it a little bit earlier so we can get some oats planted on top of that just to get some green cover over the winter time. But again, the trade-off there is the longer you wait to terminate the clover in the fall, the more nitrogen that clover will produce. So, I think October is one of the time is a time period where it can produce a tremendous amount of nitrogen. So if you kill it at the end of September, beginning of October, you're losing out maybe on 20, 30, 40 pounds of nitrogen. So again, there's a lot of trade-offs to manage when you're looking at cover crops, but I would definitely encourage folks, if you're going to do cover cropping, is to think about the end. How are you going to kill this cover crop? And what's that going to do for your subsequent crop that you're trying to grow for cash?
Yeah, and I think Greg, because you're kind of in a different zone there, and they're talking about like that end of season and your mustard crop issues that your mustard crop that you purposely have there. Are you having any of those issues with the debris in the spring?
So in that case, I'm hoping for them to frost off. And then like the field will look kind of cluttered, but what you find is when you have a crop that's frosted off, there's a lot of nutrients that are still in those tissues. The plant didn't do an organized senescence or whatever you call it when it reclaims all of its what minerals it can remobilize sort of thing. And so it's incredible the way the worms will go after anything that frosted off come springtime. And so we had one year where we did oats and then we just got a really open fall. And so the oats just tillered and tillered and tillered and we had a huge mass of material. You could not see, once it had frosted off and kind of all fallen down and like I think we got a bit of snow and then it melted and then I kind of looked at it in December and there was so much residue that I was seriously concerned about how we were going to get the field warm enough to work in the spring. Because sometimes if you can't get sun on to bare ground, you can be a long way behind the soil that is getting sun. And then I have another picture from, I want to say May 1st, which is around when we get going with tillage. And you wouldn't have been able to find a single leaf from an oat plant. It was just nothing but worm piles and wormholes everywhere. They stripped the entire 70 acres of residue. I don't know how many, like a ton per acre or whatever it would have been from that crop, but it was all gone. And it was bare
Yeah.
ground. It was one of the nicest spring fields that we had. It's like good. It's like we got our cover crop. It's like we had the soil protected all year, and then we got a nice, warm, clean start in the spring, and off we went.
Yeah, those worms do a lot of work, unpaid labor for you out there.
It was impressive. I hadn't seen that before, so that was a bit of a revelation. It's like maybe
Yeah.
we can work together, you guys.
Dean, with your two different farms that you have, are you finding that you would do different cover crops with the two different ecosystems, weather patterns you have going on?
A bit. Um, I was just thinking the difference between Greg and I and the island is even more so.
Yeah.
We have very little frost through the winter. We will go most winters, especially on the island, without much ground frost, and that's a great opportunity for nitrogen to leach away. So if you have clover and you've worked it up, that that'll leach away. Whereas Greg will have be frozen all winter, and a lot of those nutrients get more frozen and kept. At the same time, we have the entire winter more possibility of residue to rot down, whereas Greg would be like in a freezer a lot of the winters. So there is quite a bit of difference, especially with nitrogen carryover. On this past winter, we were frozen most of the winter, just one of those rare cold winters for us. And I suspected in the springtime we probably would have picked up another 30 pounds just of nitrogen just because it was frozen most of the winter. And our wheat crop, I will say, was probably one of the best wheat crops I've ever had. For organic, it was yielding 80 and 90 bushel. And part of it, it had digestate put on it. Part of it, I think, was more carryover nitrogen by along the lines of 20 or 30 pounds than we normally would have if we'd have had an open winter. So we also, with regard to the island, we can't get over there to terminate it on time like we could at home. So we have to take that into consideration for cover crops because clover really can get away from you. You really have to be Johnny on the spot with terminating it, or even going out in January, February on light frost and working it in at that point just to kind of work it into the soil and help break it down. So it clover is a great crop, but it is difficult to manage in the spring. The conventional guys have a much easier time when they can just spray it off.
Yeah. And one of the things you keep mentioning is your pounds of nitrogen. How are you measuring that?
Hmm,
Good question.
it is. And it's just
Yeah.
I know from my conventional days, it takes 100 pounds of nitrogen to grow a good wheat crop. Even some of the guys go to 120. So if I get a crop of wheat that's yielding 80, 90 bushel to the acre, I know there was probably a good 90 to 100 pounds of nitrogen that was available there. But there's no real measurement that I've invested in to do that. I could have sent the soil out to be tested, but there's really not much I can do about it. You know, it's easier in the conventional world when they can put down 100 pounds and they see exactly what they get. And in the organic world, we're just kind of depending on natural nitrogen and breaking it down and having it available at the right time. You can get a lot of carryover from clover, but it might be available when it breaks down in December and February when it washes away. So come springtime, there may not be that 100 pounds left. There may be almost none left. Whereas other times it can be a lot there left. So it's kind of guessing by golly that is kind of what you go by. 40 years of experience, Erica. That's what it is. You said I was an expert at the beginning of the show, which I laughed at.
So, and I'm thinking about it sounds like it's so variable in terms of what your losses could be in the winter, but you're not testing it all in the spring. Like you wouldn't amend your soil or anything like that if you did have a lot of losses. Are you still just playing by luck, or is there something you're going to do if you potentially have had a lot of losses over the winter? Do you know when you've had a lot of losses over the winter?
Nitrogen's expensive to put down in an organic form. There are things available like Good and Green from Terry Good and different things, but it's expensive. And so, you put down, I don't alter it based on the winter I've had because a lot of times I've lined it up ahead of time anyway. You just notice these things as years go by, different crops and different winters and things. But nitrogen and phosphorus are very expensive to replace.
Yeah. What about you, Greg? I know because you're with manure and stuff like that, you're adding more later on. Have any in the way that you're doing things? I guess you're a little bit more consistent than you know how much you're going to have per year.
So I did a lot of work accounting for the hog manure and the chicken manure. We used to send a lot of chicken manure samples away. We sent a lot of hog manure samples away. And then ultimately, I spent, I think it was $1,200 on a tank side testing kit for the hog manure. And so it's like a little chemistry kit. It's like you have to take a certain amount and weigh it out, and you add this solution, you add that solution, and it bubbles, and you measure the pressure of the gas coming off of it. And even when you start to develop that greater accuracy, like tank side, and so you know what each gallon is worth, and you know just how many gallons you're putting on, and you have, GPS managing everything so that you've got the precise rate all over the field. Even a week later, you're not exactly sure. It's like it depends on rainfall, and it depends on soil type, and it depends on what the crop is doing, and even like, we've put down a lot of nitrogen before and then had a relatively weedy crop, and the crop acts as if it's 60 pounds short. Like you kind of look at the yield and you look at the stand, and it's like this should have been quite a bit more, and it's like, well, it was tied up by the weeds. And so you even kind of want to make an adjustment there. It's like if I have a good stand of corn, but then it also has a decent stand of weeds underneath it. And so nitrogen is one of the very hardest things about farming, conventional or organic.
Yeah.
And you see the conventional guys are constantly debating, it's like, should I do my nitrogen up front with an expensive stabilization chemical applied to it? Should I do it in 2 applications or in 4 applications? Should I go into the corn with an extremely expensive sprayer later on and do rescue nitrogen because we got so much water and it washed away my previous precision application? And even now it's becoming popular, a small scale popular, but growing, to have little robots that roll up and down the rows and apply nitrogen every 4 or 5 days. And so like kind of the ultimate spoon feeding. And they're seeing, much improved nitrogen management just from that. And so even the conventional world wrestles with it. And so for us, I think you sort of get to your best practices that you think, I think this mostly gives me what I need 2/3 of the time. And that's about as good as you can do.
All right. Yeah, it sounds like it's a bit of a lottery. You guys have to be really smart each year, like you're having to really look at all of the variables as well. Phil, is it less of a lottery, more of a lottery? Are you basically doing the same thing that they're all doing?
Well, if you're farming, you're playing the lottery. Let's just get that right out in front. But I think with respects to nitrogen, and like the organic standard kind of pushes us towards like organic, and I don't mean like well, I do mean certified organic, but there's nitrate, which is a soluble form of nitrogen, right? So that dissolves into water, and that's what'll wash down, your drains and into your tiles and out into the lake. And then there's like organic forms of nitrogen, which don't leach nearly to the same degree that nitrate does, right? So us in organics, like the manures have a lot more organic nitrogen than nitrate. And so then what you're counting on is for the soil biology to take that organic nitrogen and convert it into a usable nitrate form for the plants, right? So I think the philosophy, and it goes really well with cover crops, if you're trying to grow corn specifically and wheat, if you keep building your organic matter, which is organic forms of nitrogen, and have a good soil biology, of which cover crops is a part, then you kind of start getting, I think, a slow upward trend in terms of your organic matter and your available nitrogen for your crops. So yeah, like the Good and Green product that Dean mentioned, there is a portion of that that's somewhat soluble, and it's kind of nice because your wheat gets a nice shot when you put it on in the spring. 2 weeks later, you can see it green up, and you can see all the little strips that you missed. So that nitrate is available, but then like the bulk of that is going to be slowly released through the rest of the season. And having good soil biology, having cover crops can really add to the life of your soil, which is going to enable those bugs to convert that organic nitrogen that into a form that the plant can use, and hopefully it's not going to be draining down out the drains. And that's the flip side of the conventional, that they do, nitrogen leaching and loss is a big environmental problem. And I think that's where the organics has it right. Sometimes it's frustrating because the organic standard doesn't let us use more soluble forms of nitrogen, and you just really want to give your crop a shot because it needs something. But that's the trade-off that I think we've chosen as organic farmers. But building organic matter and cover crops, I think, is like the key to building a good nitrogen profile in your soil over time. And it's not a 1 year thing; it's a 5 to 10 year thing.
Yeah. So I think that's a great place for us to open this up to questions from the audience. And Phil, I think it was just a really great roundup of like what organic means and long term versus some of these other the conventional methods. So if you do have a question, you can drop it into the chat, or you can just raise your hand here, and we'll ask question for our expert panel here. And oh, and in the meantime, there's a feedback form that's popped up on your website. And if you can let us know how we're doing, we only know if we're doing what we need to be doing, if we're doing a good job, or if you'd like to see some other things, this is the way that we can find out. So please take some time to do that webinar feedback form. And yeah, so I see we have, oh, somebody says, one of my Amish friends, clients said to me once, farming is a gamble. Farming is such a gamble. It's a wonder our bishop lets us do it.
It's true. Yes, it's true.
All right. Do we have, Carolyn, you've got a question?
Yes, I'm an eater, and I noticed some of you grow spelt. Do you sell it? Do you mill it? Do you mill any of the wheat or the products that you produce?
So I'm the one that mentioned spelt.
Okay.
And I don't mill the spelt myself. It goes down the road to Dan Conselman and he dehulls it and then he sends it somewhere and it gets milled somewhere else. So I'm not sure if I mean there is a few mills in Ontario that actually will mill spelt down, but our operation is just we're bulk commodity and we're not much value added here.
Okay. Here's something else that's kind of funny. You were talking about red clover for your cover crop. I have chopped up red clover that I make tea out of. It's a herbal tea that I purchase, and the darn stuff is quite pricey to buy.
You're welcome to come with a garbage bag and scissors and fill up your garbage bag. You can have as much as you want.
Actually, I'm
You
in
pick, you
your
pick red
house.
clover.
Yes.
All right, we've got a question from admin. I don't know where admin's coming from. Greg rock picks after cultivating cover crop. Is he rock picking by hand or does he use a machine? And he's looking, oh, he's written here. He's finding a pic of his rock picking
Like,
uh machine now. He's gonna like pull up a picture of his wife or something.
whoa, whoa,
She
whoa.
makes his sandwiches for him and picks the rocks. No. You missed that earlier,
Dangerous
Greg, when we were
commenting
talking
there.
about your sandwiches and your wife making your sandwiches. So,
No, I like some of these fields I've been picking my entire life. Not just my adult life. Like I started when I was 6 years old, sort of thing. And after like 3 decades, and like there's still a billion rocks. It's no, we've switched over to well, I don't know. I want to say we used a hay buster a couple times from a rental place, and then we stone bear for a couple years, a custom guy, and then it's been the Elo scorpion pickers most recently. I think they're from Finland originally, but they've become really popular around here the last 5 years or so. And so sometimes we rent them ourselves, or we'll rent one machine, or we'll have one or two custom guys come in and do it. But we have built mountains of stones. So we're just in kind of a stony area, so they're a big deal. And they interfere in all kinds of stuff. Like they just chew up your equipment. They chew up, cultivator sweeps. They chew up cultivator trip pins or pivot pins. It's nothing to be combining and get to the end of the row and have 6 or 8 stones balancing on the combine header bar. But like if I stop or cutter bar, but it's like if I stopped for every rock on the combine, I'd never get anything done. And so you just watch them all as they slowly get closer to the feeder house. And if they get right there and you think they're going to come in, then you stop and kick them off. But no, so yeah, rock
what
picking.
does it cost per acre to have someone come in and do the stones for you? Is that how they do it by acre or?
I paid my kids 10 cents a rock and they ran for 3 hours straight. Um, they each made almost $100, but it was cheaper than renting a rock picker and they covered about 80 acres.
Are you
Okay.
renting out the kids now?
They probably would just make sure you pay them by the unit, not by the hour. They figured that out pretty quick.
All right. Panelist says OFA says Southern Ontario, 27% of grain will soon change with the closure of the grain docks by Sarnia. Does anybody have anything to say about that? Heard about that?
That'd be in the conventional world, but I, I've heard about it, but I don't know anything specific on it.
No. All right.
All the
Okay.
organic grain is just trucked quite often to the south or to the mills in Ontario.
Okay. So we're gonna wrap up with our panel now. I want to just thank you so much, Greg, Phil, and Dean, for coming out. And I know it's a really busy time as we're getting into farming season. I really appreciate you taking the time and all the people that have also taken their time today out of their day to learn from you. And just to note that we do have some other webinars we're hoping that all of you can join us on. This week we have the butter breakdown. So, say Guillermo Anderson from St. Bridget's Creamery is going to be talking to us about all things butter. And if you have not had St. Bridget's Creamery butter, you are missing out. It is the most delightful butter on the planet, and we're going to hear a little bit about how that's made and so much more about butter that you probably never imagined. And we also, on July 20th, will be meeting. Actually, I think that's going to be changed, right? Sammy, that's on here, but Angela said she wasn't available on the 20th. Is that right? So the date on that will be different. But we're going to be meeting again with our retailers about scaling without losing identity. So that date's going to be
I think
to
it's
be
17th of August.
Oh, so August 17th. Okay, good to know. We've got a redo date on that one. And then we're going to be right back here with Greg, Phil, and Dean again, preparing to market your grain. And I think we've gotten a lot of hints about how that happens, but we're going to really dive deep into what that looks like. And we'll be back with them on August 10th. So put that onto your calendars. We also are going to be out on farms this next couple of months as well. So yesterday we had an amazing event. It was a HasCat brunch. I got to eat a brunch at Paradise Field Farms. We had a tour there. It was a lovely, lovely day. Our next event is happening on August 15th at Southbrook Winery. And this is a beautiful winery down in the Niagara-on-the-Lake area. And they've been working on some research with Brock University of integrating native plants into the vineyards. And so we'll be talking about that research that's happening, as well as enjoying some of that of those organic wines and cheese and lots of just yumminess and enjoying organic farming. And if you haven't met the team at Southbrook, you are in for an experience of learning because they love to teach about organic farming and vineyards. We also have a afternoon wagon ride happening at Finnings Organic Farms. If you're not familiar with Finnings, it means you've been under a rock here in Canada. They are the OG organics in Ontario and even Canada, and they supply so many organic foods across all of our stores and restaurants. And so we're actually going to be out at their farm on September 19th for a wagon ride, and it will be very educational and beautiful and fun. And that's, I think, Baden, around Baden areas where that will be. Oh, New Hamburg, there it is on there. So yeah, so we're hoping you can join us on September 19th for that. And then just a reminder that we're here doing these amazing events, out on these farm tours, doing our advocacy work, creating tools for all of those in the organic value chain, putting together meetings, collaborating, all because people have invested in us. And so if you're not a member, we would love for you to become a member of Ontario Organic. And we do have a membership type for every single person. But we also have a fundraiser that we're doing for the next couple of months. And that's our organic fundraising plan. Samuel, drop a link into the chat there. And so if you're already a member, but you would like to continue, find other ways to donate, you can actually donate to very specific projects through our fundraiser. And our goal is going to take us through the end of Organic Month in September. And we're hoping to raise $120,000 for those initiatives. So we're hoping that you will have an opportunity to either invest yourself or share that with people and help us raise money for all the different things that we're doing here at Ontario Organic. So we look forward to seeing you next month. Greg, Phil, and Dean, it was really a great conversation today. There was so much education here, not just about cover crops, but really the science behind organic farming that we just need to continue talking about. I think that's sometimes the hardest part to understand. So thank you so much for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Great one.